City Matters.
Welcome back here to the Fog of War Humanity on hmTV. This afternoon we have Irv Adler here, who traveled from his home in Westchester to be here at the Nassau County Holocaust Museum in Glen Cove. Irv started the podcast off with speaking about Brooklyn, speaking about his childhood, kind of getting into the different things of the city. He grew up with a lot of Jewish friends, a lot of immigrants, survivors that had come over here from Europe itself, but also a lot of other groups of kids that made Brooklyn in such a melting pot. We got into his family, the history of his family in Czechoslovakia. His dad, who was just more or less homeless for many, many years on his own, a survivor, somebody that his back was up against the wall many a times, and he kind of figured out how to live. And what we ended off with in terms of the first podcast was the war is there. Your parents are married. They have a home. Your dad's kind of conscripted into the labor services of the Hungarian military. They're living as normal a life as they possibly could with the war around them.
That's right.
The Holocaust is going as well. Probably about 2 or 3 years into the Holocaust at this point. And your sister is born, right?
Yes.
So now where are your parents when your sister is born?
So they are living in eastern Czechoslovakia, what today we call Slovakia. And they are in a small town. Their towns have names like Sekernice and Takova, and they are living here when the Germans finally make their way all the way east into Czechoslovakia in 1944. And the Germans come into the town and kind of follow their regular playbook. Get all the Jews in one place, tell them they all have to live together. They start seizing homes, creating a ghetto even where there were none, pushing multiple families into single homes, and telling them to await further instructions, and ultimately deporting them.
To get all the names down.
Yeah, of course.
They start taking the wealth.
Absolutely.
Right?
They start seizing everything they can.
Right?
They seize everything they possibly can in terms of usable household goods. And they know who everyone is, and they tell people that they're going to work. They're going to work. We just need you to do some work for us. No big deal. This, of course, is to tamp down any resistance, to tamp it down in advance by getting people into a more docile state.
Now, it would be your grandmother on your mother's side, right?
That's right.
Or your grandparents on your mother's side, right?
That's my mom is living with her mom and their new baby.
Did they go with your parents, right? Did your grandmother go and live with your parents?
Yes. So what's happening here is they are living together, yes. And at the same time, 2 sisters have already made off to Israel. And so you have 2 sisters still there. And you have families that have developed around this. People, as you say, are trying to live as normal a life as possible.
You have cousins, you have aunts and uncles, right?
So, and not only in their town, but in other towns. So one day the order comes onto the trains. So these are the cattle cars.
Now, your dad
is with them.
So did they prevent him going on that work detail to Hungary?
Well, his conscripted service to Hungary was already over. This is one of the cruel ironies, is that they thought their normal life could at least begin pending some defeat of the Nazis.
Yeah.
So at this time, what you get is a lot of stories out of Europe. People who have the means to leave tend to leave, and You also have the fact that not everyone was poor like my parents. One of the ironies of the war is that 10% of Poland was Jewish, and people had an amazing, thriving society going. In Germany, of all places, Jews are thriving. They're accepted in medicine, the arts, the sciences, education, everywhere you could possibly be. So there's this enormous betrayal of a native population and a claim that they're not really German or Polish or whatever the case might be.
And that's what I asked you before, because you do get a lot of European Jews. They say, I'm Jewish, but this nationality. I see myself the nationality before the religion like anybody else.
Well,
and they fight in World War I for the countries, and it's they show their loyalty. They've been there for generations, and
there was one of the things that would come out of the war was among the survivors was you would get a Jewish person in Germany, and they would say, "I did not call myself a Jew first. I called myself a German first. I'm a Jewish German, and I am a German. I just happen to be Jewish."
Like in this country.
Yeah, except in this country, it sticks and it means something.
Sure.
Which is part of our exceptional nature. But in Europe, it turned out not to mean anything.
Now, you had a lot of Jews in the various countries. A lot of them just thought, this is just a bad wave of anti-Semitism, but it's gonna blow by. We've lived through it before. It's gonna get ugly, but it's gonna blow by. That's how some people just stayed, right? But
the word was getting out more and more and more. That's not true. They're killing people in these camps. And my folks, having no choice, end up on the cattle cars. They're riding for a few days. It's unbelievable. I mean, you can only imagine the fear and the anxiety of being packed into cars like this.
Not knowing where you're going.
Not knowing where you're going, but guessing. And then finally, after all of this horror, and, people probably had a pretty good idea where they were going, but the gate to Auschwitz has famously a sign over it that says, "Work will make you free," which was part of the pacification campaign. But they no sooner arrive than they're unloaded from the train.
What year is this?
We are now in 1944.
So 44. Auschwitz will be liberated in January of 45. So the war is literally coming to an end.
Yeah.
Or in the last part of it.
They're still deporting people.
And they're still they're motivated to kill as many people as possible.
They're still going at it.
Yeah.
They have two things they're trying to do. And I've always said that these poor folks, in their own way, were part of the military effort because they diverted so much of the German forces who had to tend to them and round them up and everything else. If those troops had been sent to the front, Germany might have lasted a bit longer.
Yeah, sure.
But they needed slave laborers.
But Eichmann still had the trains running. He still was looking for the people.
They're still trying to implement the final solution all the way through, and they know they need to enslave more people. And so they still need those laborers, new slaves, to replace the ones they've already killed off.
I would imagine that's one of the reasons why your dad was taken in Hungary, because a lot of the Hungarian men were probably conscripted into the army, and they were sent to the Eastern Front.
Yeah, of course. So you had
and they got hammered on the Eastern Front pretty bad over there.
Right.
And
you wouldn't have a Jew fight for you, but you could certainly have a Jew, prepare supplies and everything else.
Work,
Exactly right. So this story is a little typical. It's all too typical. They get off the trains, and they're sorted immediately. They're pretty sure it was Mengele himself who sorted them, Dr. Joseph Mengele, the butcher of Auschwitz.
You said to me that your father was like a good-sized guy, right?
Yeah, my father was
So for a guy who probably went through periods of hunger, right, homeless, all these different things that lead to malnourishment, right, and sickness, he was a pretty physical. I mean, in the picture, he's standing upright. Was that the case when he ended up?
He did, because what happened was, as he was in his late teens, early 20s, and he was in his produce business, he was eating and living normally enough. And in the labor camp in Hungary, same thing. I mean, they were not starving people; they were feeding people. Afterward, living that brief period in the ghetto, food got tight there. But my folks arrived at Auschwitz at ages 27 and 28, and strong enough, healthy enough, perfect age for forced labor. And so this is, as they're being sorted down the line, they're going to end up going to the right. But there's a horrible part to this story, which is that, remember, my mom has my sister Feige in her arms, and she's with her sisters and her mother.
And how old is your sister?
She was born in 1943, and now it's mid-1944. She's only about a year old.
And she would have been the oldest sibling out of all you guys, right?
She would have been, yeah. Exactly right. So she'd be 5 years older than my brother, 11 years older than me. So part of this unbelievably evil process is they would have, and my mom remembers a young Polish boy assigned to work the line. So men immediately separated from women, working age versus the sick, working future slaves to the right, everyone else to the left.
They kind of ask you, what was your job, right?
Yeah, they take a look at you and see if certainly sort for skills where there were any, no doubt. And this boy looks at my mom and the baby and says, "You want to live, so just give the baby to your mom," which she does. So now, in this very convenient way,
and not knowing, they don't know anything.
We're going to take care of them. They'll be taken care of. You'll catch up with them later. This is what all the women were told as they gave up their kids. Everyone, people have seen Sophie's Choice. It's not all that different.
That was with her kids, and that was Mengele, right? Where she had to determine, it was a son or daughter.
She had to pick between one and the other, This was...
and that was based out of Brooklyn.
Yes.
Right? So
exactly. So the baby's in my grandmother's arms. They go to the left. That's the last my mom sees them. She and her sisters go to the right. They're soon enough, they're in the barracks.
And it's two other sisters there?
At that point.
Wow.
And then the work period begins. So I want to show you a couple of things. So while they're committing these crimes, the Germans are, to show you how they looked at all this, how they viewed all this, they're keeping detailed records. It's really unbelievable. They're like, it's like the level of evil you saw in American slave owners. They think there's nothing to it. This is just how it works. I'm going to show you my mom's record first.
And the Third Reich was known for their organization.
Oh yeah, the
meticulous.
Efficiency. That's how they killed so many people so fast. They had goals at Auschwitz of 5,000 a day. I don't know if you can read this, but I'll read it for you. This is an official German record card given to us by the German government, who has been very good about releasing this trove of records. So my mom was taken from the ghetto in Tokova in April of 1944 to arrive at Auschwitz. Then she is sent pretty quickly to a camp named Salzwedel, where she's been farmed out with other women to work for a munitions maker, and is freed in about a year later in April of 45. That's her record. My dad has a much longer record. I know you can't read all the details, but you could see that there are more entries on it.
Can you personally read that? Do you know? Is that German?
No, it's German, but rendered into English, and I'll go through it. So my dad is branded with the number A8764 here on his arm, and he goes from the Hungarian Arbeitslager, which is where he worked from October of 1940 to January of 44. They have that on his record. He's in that same ghetto. He's in the ghetto at Yokors, and he is At Auschwitz now again in April of 44. And then
What was that ghetto? Like the one for your mom was a munitions. What was the ghetto for your father that he...
they are the ghetto was kind of where you were held before you were deported.
Sure. Yeah.
My mom's camp, Salzwedel, was a munitions making
And then what was your
facility.
dad's camp there?
So my dad went alternately to a number of work camps, and you could see how the Germans are now crazy to start moving people among work camps where they need them, my dad being a man especially. So he ended up at Auschwitz-Birkenau, and then at Gleiwitz, Oranienburg, Flossenburg, and finally Mühldorf, where he was freed from. So he goes to a series of camps to do whatever work is required. He recalls having to do something with industrial or munitions making himself, basically working in furnace areas where things were being forged or crafted. And, you know, the most dangerous and filthiest work was given to the Jews always. And my mom remembers at times having to clear fields of rocks and things like that. It was, whatever was the worst work. The idea was these people are all going to die anyway.
Expendable.
Yeah. Except, ironically, by the end of the war, they have killed so many people, and there's really no more areas to enslave. The Germans are kind of out of slave laborers, and they know it, because now they're not going to be able to go into Russia and pick up more people.
And a lot of their either older men or younger boys and adults are in uniform.
Exactly right. So as they are here, as my dad's being moved around, he gets caught up. And if you go to Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, you see the tale of this. The Germans make a decision. I think it comes out of Goebbels, the propaganda chief, that there's not going to be you cannot allow one camp survivor to be taken alive. You see this in Band of Brothers, too, where the Germans, instead of just fleeing, have orders to kill everyone on their way out.
You see that with the American soldiers. They had no idea.
They
might have heard rumors, but they just...
Right.
No, but there was no concrete evidence for these guys.
The important thing to remember and to bring up immediately whenever Holocaust denial is taking place is to remember most of these records are kept by the American military, the British military. It's not Jewish folks who had the original records and experiences.
Yeah.
These are non-Jewish military leaders who documented all of this, who liberated the camps.
Kind of outsiders looking in.
Yes,
right?
soldiers on the ground, all of whom, even after being battle-hardened, couldn't believe what they were seeing. My dad is at Flossenburg when they start this absolutely maniacal effort to get the last Jews out of the way of the oncoming allies. Remember, Russia's coming from the east and everyone else from the west. So
the Germans are in a vice.
They're in a vice, thankfully.
Winter and spring of 45.
Yes, and so this is a harsh winter as they run there. It's about February, and they load these guys into open cars and start to take them out by train to move them further west. When they start to, of course, die of starvation, they freeze to death. Yad Vashem estimates 90% of the people who started on these missions were lost, and my dad miraculously survived, as he recalls, mostly by huddling in a corner with two other men.
The incredible part of that is your dad's in January, February, the war comes to an end within like 4 months.
Exactly right. So
you have people die that could almost see the war come to an end.
For no reason whatsoever. They were no longer being used as slaves. There was nothing except this crazed effort to somehow hide what now suddenly folks realize were crimes.
To erase the witnesses.
Yes.
Right?
So this is going on, and this is one of the examples of the sheerest brutality. My mom couldn't even talk about her experiences without crying and just lamenting the sheer brutality of the Germans.
Let me ask you this here. Your parents going to Auschwitz in what month? Again, was it April?
April 44.
44. The Soviets are coming in. January 45. They're not, obviously you have men's barracks and women's barracks, different jobs, and Auschwitz is, people don't realize
Yes.
you have the killing facilities of Birkenau, but you also have all of the barracks for people that were working within Auschwitz, outside of Auschwitz, different plants, right?
Right.
Do your parents realize that they must have realized that they were both? Did your dad realize that your mom was still alive at that
They
point?
had no way to tell.
They had no idea of knowing.
They had no way to tell. And so you had this extra anxiety. My mom said it took her and the other women weeks to figure out that their kids were dead. Remember, too, if a woman turned out to be pregnant while she was doing slave labor, she was shot immediately.
Did they ever, just by sheer luck, run into each other in the camps where they were walking or?
No.
Wow.
Well, and again, to recall that my mom was in Salzwedel when my dad was already at Gleiwitz, so they weren't even in the same locations at all. They were at Auschwitz together pretty briefly.
So they got deported together to Auschwitz?
Right, and then they got separated there. I'm just checking the dates here. For example, my mom was quickly sent to Salzwedel, and my dad is very quickly sent. Within days, he is sent to Gleiwitz, where they needed young, strong laborers. So,
did your parents ever tell you what their first moments were in Auschwitz? Did they ever say, we went to this place, we had no idea? I mean,
this is in the area of stuff people really didn't talk about. My mom would only, again in tears, explain how she couldn't believe the brutality and how she lost her daughter, my sister, and her mom. My dad, it's not the kind of thing he would talk about in those terms. My dad had a thing of trying to condense his whole Holocaust experience into just a few stories. He would always say, if I told you what happened there, you wouldn't believe it.
Sure.
But at the same time, he would try to tell 2 or 3 stories that would kind of sum it up.
Now, up in the Catskills or in parts of Brooklyn, where you have a high concentration of survivors, even out here on Long Island and northern Jersey, Connecticut, did you ever hear any of those stories, or were they close? Just say, all right, we're going to talk about this behind closed doors.
No,
away from the kids.
No one's going to sit there and start regaling you with these horrible, horrible tales. To understand better that period, though, it's funny. I met Elie Wiesel at an industry conference later on. This was a pharmaceutical industry conference. It's a long story. That ended up being the field I worked in, biotech. But he pointed out that my dad's number and his were only about 1,000 apart, 1,000 numbers apart. So he said we probably arrived within a day of each other. So if you read Elie Wiesel's book,
because the numbers are so great. Yeah.
Exactly. This one has a foreword by Barack Obama. This is, in fact, an excellent account of what daily life was like in the camps at that time. And, it's beyond any understanding. But the Nazis were very determined. They had labor to be done. And this maniacal effort to wipe out, when you think about them determined to wipe out the Jews and their determination to conquer the world, you have to wonder what other entire groups were they planning to wipe out. Something that we should all keep in mind.
Hitler's last will and testament was mostly geared towards Jewish, conspiracy and blaming them for everything and so on.
Yeah.
When you met Elie Wiesel, did you tell him my parents were Holocaust? Did you say that to him?
That's why I told him the number, my dad's number, and he said that's about 1,000 away from mine, and that's how he I knew that night was the correct source.
Were you able to talk to him for a little bit? Were you able?
Just a minute or two. We were in the middle of this conference. Awards were being given to research scientists and all this kind of thing. So we didn't really have a lot of time to chat. But you look at the history of anti-Semitism, like so many other forms of racism, but anti-Semitism in particular, and you try to locate the Nazi era in this broader history, and you say, well, where does it fit? Is this something brand new? Well, we know it wasn't brand new. We know that the Jews were expelled from Spain in 1492.
Sure.
We know that the Jews of Italy were forced into a ghetto in 1516. And so in many ways, you can understand the Nazi era as a culmination.
The pogroms in terms
exactly,
of...
100,000 killed in Ukraine before World War II. So
it's, but it's something that doesn't go away.
Well, we're seeing that here in the U.S. right now, aren't we?
Right?
Sadly.
It gets a little better in time and it gets worse, and it doesn't go away.
Well, this is something that I certainly personally wish people would remember, that it's very easy to simplify history based on a few good decades for this group or that group, but it just does not go away.
Doesn't go away. All right, so we're going to come back for a third episode on the Fog of War and Humanity here on hmTV. Irv has definitely opened up about his family. We're going to talk about kind of the end of the war. I would imagine the end of the Holocaust itself, and then how they end up, his family ends up coming to America. Please return for a third episode.